After Ukraine urged European Union to make it part of the EU bloc, a top EU official says there are different opinions on enlarging the bloc. European Union official, in fact, Charles Michel, said that there were disagreements among the 27 member states on enlarging the bloc as Kiev appealed for membership in the face of a Russian invasion. Meanwhile, Russia is facing a host of heavy sanctions from the West aimed at crippling its economy. Major Russian banks have been cut off from the SWIFT payments system, which will hit the country's access to international payments. Oil and gas supermajor British Petroleum has announced it will offload its 19% stake in Russian-owned oil firm Rosneft. Russian currency ruble has crashed a whopping 30%. Russia's central bank has hiked key interest rates to 20%. That's almost double of what it was. Russian President Putin will be meeting officials to discuss the economic impact of the sanctions, but Russia has said that they have the necessary potential to recover from the war-induced damages. Let's bring in some perspective here. Colonel Utkarsh Singh Rathod is joining us here on the broadcast. Thank you very much, Colonel, for joining us here on Mirror Now. My first question to you is with regard to what's going on at this point in time. On one hand, there are peace talks that are going on. On the other hand, the shelling, the violence, all of that is continuing as well. What is your own opinion of where these talks are actually headed, given that obviously the most important point is withdrawal of the Russian troops, which is what Ukraine wants, but obviously Russia will want something in return?
Avni, is a very peculiar situation. Normally, when there are peace talks, the war is halted. But the war is abating, and a delegation from Ukraine has gone to the border town with Belarus for talks. And it is something like Ukraine is suing for peace. And we also saw that the nuclear forces were also put on high alert. So this is going on, and meanwhile, in the combat situation in Ukraine is also taking a reverse, and it is not very favorable to Russians. The southern pincers from Mariupol, Odessa, and other Kherson, the correspondent was saying, all these have petered out. They have not made much of headway. Similarly, the Kharkiv thing is also stuck there, and north of Kharkiv, Sami attacks from this direction of Sami is also not progressing well. They are stuck in Kyiv also. So they have done well. Ukrainian army and the volunteers, it appears they have done well, and they have blunted the offensive. So this is going on. You also talked about the sanctions. These sanctions are going to have a very far-reaching effect on Russia, not only Russia and other countries as well. And the way they have been now proclaimed, the sanctions are going to hit Russians' transport, transactions, production, and selling the I produce in international market. It's a bad news because this sanction is going to weaken Russia further, and it's a very bad news in Asia, particularly for India. Yes. So this is also being taken into account. So the human tragedy apart, these are the ramifications which I can see, which are unfolding in Ukraine now. And let us see what happens to talks. But I must say that Zelensky has held his front very well, and he has brought some kind of stalemate to the Russians' blitzkrieg, the way they started. In fifth day, they are now facing the music. As it lengthens, they will face the problem of the oil, the fuel for their armored vehicles. They would find problem in finding the ammunition for the vehicles, and also for the other logistics for the troops. Yes. So it's going to happen now.
Yes.
So let us see how it is happening.
Yes, absolutely. There are a lot of various angles, like you pointed out. But in terms of what Russia is saying at this point in time, obviously we've seen that whatever Putin says can't be taken at face value, obviously. But at this point, Russia says it has the ability to overcome all of this damage that these sanctions will cause. It has, on the other hand, Putin putting the nuclear forces on alert as well. How do you read into all of these statements? Because these sanctions are extremely strong as well.
Look, Avni, the sanctions, if you see the sanctions, they are entire Europe is saying don't fly over us. Entire Canada, America is saying don't fly over. If you can't fly, your civil aviation will be crippled. Same thing will now come for the shipping. So same thing is going to happen in banking transaction. Already they have passed directives that nobody would buy their oil and gas. So these things today they may not affect Putin, but in the long run they will be affecting very badly to Putin, and he should understand this, that sanctions are going to, because Putin doesn't have the clientele of erstwhile USSR where they could sell produce to each other by barter system or something like that. Today they have to survive in a global economy, and whatever Russia loses in these sanctions will be a gain for China. And if it becomes a gain for China, these sanctions may weaken Russia, but they will embolden China too much, and he can attempt the same thing with Taiwan one day. Or they can also come in some way to us as a threat in Arunachal Pradesh or along the LAC, or in connivance with Pakistan. I mean, there are many permutation combination of threats which can unfold in Southeast Asia. That's the point. And sanctions are not going to be very easy now. I'm very pretty sure about it. And one thing I would like to say, even if they subdue Ukraine, suppose they capture it, the anti-Russian temper is so high in Ukraine, they will not be able to hold it for long. It will be another Chechnya for them.
Yes.
This is going to happen very, very soon time, because they don't have. That's why he is telling, let's have talk. He is asking the Ukrainian army to take over, because he doesn't have anybody whom he can hand over. And anti-Russian sentiments are very high in Ukraine.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, Colonel, that is one possible outcome that you have, spoken about here. With regard to these talks, what are the other possible outcomes here? Because after coming to this level, Putin is not going to simply, agree to sort of withdraw without anything, getting anything out of all of this after coming this far. So what is it that you think this could go down in terms of how it finally turns out at the resolution of these peace talks?
I think it's a little premature to gesticulate, but now I can say one thing. Putin wants some sort of guarantee from the EU, from the NATO, and also from the Ukraine that they will not join NATO. And the halt of NATO would be stopped at Ukraine. This is one thing he wants. So for this talk, which is going on, which has started today, the moot point in there, the baseline must have been that to prepare Ukraine to say that they will not join NATO. So this is one thing which they want. But now America and rest of the NATO and the Europe is in no mood to talk to Putin. So he has to start somewhere so that he can further these talks, and this guarantee has to come. But Russia has done a wrong thing. I understand. I don't endorse that. But this was also precipitated by the expansionism of NATO. In last 13 years, as many as 14 or 15 countries have joined NATO in the vicinity of Russia. When the Cold War has ended, what was the requirement of such expansion? Nobody came and helped the Ukraine. Nobody has come. They are only making false promises and hollow promises of sending some weapons and a non-military aid to Ukraine, whereas they should have at least deployed their troops. That has not happened. It is a big letdown for NATO also. Ukraine, Zelensky actually was very hopeful that military intervention would come the moment the first shot is fired in the battlefield.
Yes, absolutely. Fair enough. Colonel, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your perspective. We will, of course, have to wait and see how these talks actually go forward.